Hey Ben, can you hear me?
What's up?
Hey, how are you?
Good. How are you?
All right. It's 9:30 in the morning here. So yeah, I mean, I've definitely had wine earlier than 9:30 in
Right.
the past, but it's not every day I get to taste wine at 9:30 in the morning. So there's that.
You're in? Where are you?
In Seoul, Korea.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. My sister's out here with her brought her kids and husband. They kind of took a month off as a trial run to see what it's like to travel during the summer. And if things work out, they're gonna try to come out here every summer, just kind of expose their kids to the culture. So yeah, um, and so I figure I'll join them. And my folks are also retiring at the end of this year, so they're gonna move out of the home that I grew up in here back in the days. So it's kind of like the last chance to visit the family home and family house and all of that. So figure I'll come out and spend some time.
Cool. Where are they moving?
Yeah. It's to Seoul.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they're gonna. I grew up outside of Seoul, different little town on the eastern part of Korea. So yeah. How are you? How are things, man? You is how's the custom crush going? And
It's good. Keeping me very busy.
yeah, that
But I was in the vineyard earlier, so a little sweaty, but we're all right.
okay. Are you're not farming at this point, right? You're purchasing all the fruits, right?
For Party Kiwi, that's purchased fruit, yeah. But it's actually right across the street from the vineyard that my brother and I farm.
Got
Uh,
it. Yeah.
so
Cool.
I was right near the vineyard for Party Kiwi about 20 minutes ago.
Yeah. Right on. Uh, is it getting easier? I know I feel like this is actually I haven't talked to you about this, but the Commonwealth is kind of like the extension of kind of what you were doing already before a lot of what you're doing at Earth Mountain. So is that kind of like has it been a easier, smoother transition because of that, or has it been pretty tough?
I mean, I think the winemaking is simpler now because Early Mountain had so many different wines we were making. And so I get to concentrate on, you know, Midland and Lightwell. And then the Commonwealth wines, we kind of divide up the sort of creative spirit behind them. Um,
Yeah.
but, the harder part's the running of business. Uh,
Yeah.
So that's something I didn't do a whole lot of before, and it's a very large part of my life now. So
Yeah.
it's a lot of time.
I know you have other partners on this thing, but are you the sole winemaker or like do you have other winemaking partner?
No, well, so Tim's a winemaker, but he handles more the vineyard side of the company, and then we have a partner who's much more on the financial side of
Yep.
things. But we've got a really good production manager, winemaker, who helps handle the day to day of all the like pieces, parts, moving parts and
Yep.
stuff.
Yeah.
But I end up doing a lot more sort of GM type stuff just to
Yep.
hold the company together. Because
Yep.
I'm there for the winemaking on a day to day basis, and so I get deputized with the running of the business on a day to day basis.
Do you, I mean, these are all part of the questions that are probably going to come up when we actually get to talking about it with the wine club people. But do you miss the winemaking? I mean, now that you get to do a little less of it, or you get to focus
I
more on the
I
business?
like having a little bit more focus in my brain in terms of like number of wines because there's Midland, which is very much about like these kind of more varietal approach, not always, but more varietal approach and more classical winemaking, still like very minimalist and
Yeah.
low input. And the light wells, thematically co-ferment.
Yep.
And then Commonwealth is just Commonwealth is the sort of we get to experiment and try different things, and you know, if it works. Like this party kiwi thing was a little bit of surprise that people seem to love it, and so we're making another one.
It's good.
Yeah.
It's very good and it's fun. It's just like it's not something you would expect.
Yeah.
Yeah, it rocked my world. I was like, what? I'm sorry, did you say Sauvignon Blanc from Shenandoah? Like, what did you just say?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. What's up, Leah?
Hello,
Uh,
how's it going?
all right. You know, just testing out
How's your
some sound.
travel?
Testing some-
Yeah.
Travel's good. Travel's good. It's been very hot. It's been very humid here. It's just so sweaty all day, every day. Uh,
More so
but
than
Get one of
DC.
those portable neck fans or like handhelds with you.
yeah, it is less it's lower in temperature, but it's higher in humidity. So it is just oppressive. It's like sauna when you get out there. It's like the July is the monsoon season here. So it's just been dumping rain every day. But it's not like all day kind of consistent rain. It's just like sky opens up for like half an hour and dumps just buckets, and then it clears up for hours, and then it just dumps again.
Now, when it's clear, is it pretty muggy then? Like just those like
Very,
times.
very, very, very muggy. Oh, hello. I didn't realize you were joining.
I'm crashing.
Okay, excellent, excellent. That's my partner, Jessalyn, by the way. There's Ben and Leah. Yeah, so it's been super muggy. So temperature-wise, not hot, but it just feels very hot just because it's so damn humid. But all the subways are like, not the subway, the metro station itself, but the actual trains themselves are like ice chest cold, which is awesome. A lot of buildings, pretty much every building has an AC. So like whenever you just need a little break from the heat, you can just, you know, pop into a little store, bank, whatever, and then cool off. But yeah, it's been fun. It's been different, but it's been fun. I thought my niece and nephew we're gonna have a harder time adjusting to, like, you know, the new culture and new country, but they seem to be doing perfectly fine. Not so hot on the food though. So we keep having to like make pasta and like buy them pizza and like buy like bakeries and shit. But you know, otherwise they're having a great time. Oh, I was telling Ben, this is definitely not the earliest I've ever tasted wine, but it's not every day I get to taste wine at 9:30 in the morning. And I didn't even think about it, and I made a dumb mistake of getting a coffee because it's like a thing that it's a habit. You get up and you drink some coffee, and I was like, ah, shit, I have to taste wine. So now here I am tasting wine with a coffee. So, there it is. There it is.
Do you
So
carry,
yeah, so
carry the bottle all the way to Seoul?
right here, in my carry-on. I brought 4 bottles out here with me. So not 4 bottles of your wine, but 4 different wines because I may be here for like a month of time. So
That
yeah,
might be the first Virginia wine imported to Korea.
that it may be, honestly. I don't know if there's a Virginia wine in Korea. It's too. I wonder if it's gonna no. I don't know. I don't know what the shelf life on this thing looks like, Ben, once it's been open. But I'm actually meeting up with a Korean guy who I studied with when I was studying for the WSET diploma, and he's like the wine instructor and used to be a som, and he's like a big guy, a big player in the wine world here. I want to taste him on this wine. I'm seeing him on the 5th. So yeah, that's like almost 2 weeks. So I don't know if it's gonna be
That's a
good
little
in
while.
2 weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll see. We'll see. Damn, you're right. I should have brought another one just to have them taste on it. Anyways, get comfortable, folks. So we'll get started in a minute or two. Get people to show up. Mm. Do, 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 do. Hmm. Give me one sec. All right, let's get started here. Um, Ben's only joining us for about half an hour, so I want to be respectful of his time. Welcome everyone. Joining you from Korea at 9:30 in the morning. I was telling Ben that not the earliest I've ever tasted wine, but definitely tasting wine at 9:30. It's one of the earlier times I've done in a while, but here we are. Here we are. Um, just a few announcements real quick. I actually don't have much announcements, but so next week, next Wednesday is the 5th Wednesday of July. It's the July 31st. So which means that we're going to take a break. And then on the August 7th, we're going to start back out with our August theme, which is the Basque country. So we're going to taste our first wine on the August 7th, but just know that next week, next Wednesday, July 31st, there is no tasting. Yeah. And besides that, I don't really have any other announcement. You all know this already, or most of you, but we donate 1% of our gross revenue each month to an organization whose mission statement aligns with our values. And this month we're donating to World Central Kitchen. You all know what they do. But donation link on all of that have already been distributed to you, so you all know what to do. But yeah, so without further ado, let's get to the man of the hour, our guest speaker today, which is Mr. Ben Jordan. For those of you, which are most of you on this call that I'm seeing right now, who've been around for a few years, have seen Ben probably on this call. He's the, to this day, only person who has made it onto the wine call 3 times. So Ben, here we are. I don't have a formal bio, but I think I know enough about Ben that I can kind of give you an informal bio for those of you who are not familiar with Ben Jordan. Ben is the winemaker of this delicious number that we're about to taste today, 2022 Commonwealth Crush Company Party Kiwi. By the way, really cute label. Particularly like the nipple tassel that you added onto the kiwi, Ben. Just nice touch there. So, but Ben, I met Ben when I worked harvest for him at Early Mountain Winery, Early Mountain Vineyards. He was the head winemaker there, and I was connected through Sebastian and worked the harvest for him. But since then, Ben has started a new project And then now he started this new company called Commonwealth Crush Company, um, based out of Waynesboro, Virginia. And then he makes a variety of brands of wines, including this particular one, their own lines. But he also allows other young winemakers and other people from Virginia talent to come to his. He serves as basically a platform to provide guidance and just kind of help with all the other young winemakers in Virginia to come and make wine at his facility. And he's kind of become this Yoda essentially for the Virginia wine community, which was the role that he was already playing at Early Mountain quite a bit. So this kind of extension and a transition into this new role. But there's a lot of really cool, fun stuff coming out of there, in my humble opinion. And I know, Ben, you're not very good at receiving compliments like this, but I think you are one of the most exciting winemakers, if not the most exciting winemaker in Virginia. And for those of you who are paying attention to Virginia, you should definitely keep your eye out on this guy, because there's a lot of cool things that he's doing. But yeah, he makes the wines for Commonwealth, his own line, Lightwell Survey, as well as his Midland Construction, which is his own wine line that he runs with his brother, Tim. And then he helps with a lot of variety of other concepts. But anyways, enough of babbling from me. Let's hear from the man himself. Welcome to the call, Ben.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, and thanks for all the kind words. And hello, everyone. Happy Wednesday.
Yeah, happy Wednesday. Happy hump day for y'all. It's Thursday for me, but happy hump day for y'all. So Ben was literally just in, we were talking right before you all joined, but he was just at the vineyard right across from the vineyard where this party Kiwi comes from. So before we get into anything else, let's just talk about this wine real quick, because as soon as I tasted this wine, it just kind of immediately blew my mind, which is, one, who knew there was a Sauvignon Blanc being grown in Virginia? So one, is there much Sauvignon Blanc being grown in Virginia? Who's growing this? How did you even find this fruit? Yeah, so can you give us a little rundown on how you came upon this particular number that we're drinking today?
Yeah, so I mean, I think there's not a huge amount of Sauvignon Blanc in Virginia. It's nowhere near as planted as Chardonnay or Viognier or even Petit Manseng. But there are some folks doing it. I think folks that were looking for something a little bit, more sort of acid and still aromatic, but without being as, unctuous and aromatic as Viognier. But this particular vineyard, the reason I know about it is it's basically across the road from our family vineyard in the Shenandoah Valley. So for those of you that know the geography out there, it's north of Stanton, south of Harrisonburg, and just far enough west where you start to get up onto the ridge lines, where you start to get some elevation, which, it is a true mountain valley, and it's a river valley. And so down near the river side, which is generally the eastern side of the valley, it's relatively low elevation. And so not quite as good for growing grapes because of cold air, frost, that sort of thing. But as you move west, you get into, these ridges that, long ago were mountains in their own right, that have been weathered down. And that's where most of the grape growing is in the Shenandoah Valley, is up on these ridges. And that's where you find some pretty interesting geology for the state of Virginia. That's where a lot of the sedimentary stuff is, rather than, but a lot of the mountains are made of granite, greenstone, that type of stuff. But in the valley, you'll see sedimentary stuff, mainly limestone, or, types of like limestone shale, and then sandstone. This particular, where this is grown, is on a ridge that is mostly limestone bedrock, but every once in a while you'll find like a fold of sandstone, and so sometimes you'll hit these sandy pockets of soil. But like I said, it's across the street from us, and a relatively new vineyard being developed by some folks that actually had a vineyard up in Northern Virginia, in Loudoun County, and they were looking. It was a small vineyard, and they were looking to do something bigger. And the price of land is a a lot higher in Northern Virginia than most of the Shenandoah Valley. And so it's much easier to get, sort of bigger tracts of land. And a lot of the stuff is cleared because it's been in agriculture for a long time. So you have a lower cost of development as well. And you couple that with like these really amazing sort of southeast facing slopes with good air drainage. The soils drain water well. And then the Shenandoah Valley being one of the drier parts of the East Coast, actually, in terms of rainfall, not necessarily drinking of alcohol, but it is it has the driest county rainfall wise, I think east of the Mississippi, by some people's numbers. But all of that is, every year we see significantly less rainfall than just over the mountain in Charlottesville and Albemarle County. And that really helps with both quality of the grapes in terms of the actual harvest season, but also the farming throughout the growing season is easier with less rain. So why they planted Sauvignon Blanc, I think, is kind of going back to the original sort of statement of they were looking for something that has a little bit more freshness and verve than maybe Viognier, and something different than Chardonnay. It is a little bit more cold tender of some of the grape varieties, and so you do need a good site that is not going to get too cold, and this has good elevation. But we, as you see someone starting to grow grapes across the street from you and you go over and you say hi. So we've developed a relationship with them. And when we opened Commonwealth up in our first year, they had not yet built their winery. So they're finishing up their winery this year. And so they're no longer going to be selling grapes, but they asked us if we were interested and we said yes. And so this was honestly, like, I wasn't expecting going into the 2022 harvest to be making Sauvignon Blanc. It just happened that our neighbors had some, but we were really excited because when the fruit came in, it was really high quality, quite ripe. One thing about kind of younger vineyards is they can tend to get pretty ripe in some of their first harvests. So this is, I think, for Virginia Sauvignon Blanc, a richer, sort of more textural style. And also because the grapes were pretty small in terms of the structure of the cluster, like, as opposed to being lots of juice in the cluster, there was a lot more skin. So I think that is texturally sort of apparent in the wine, as there's a density to the texture. But yeah, it was, you didn't ask, but I'll go into the winemaking. So in general, so let me back up. So Commonwealth was started because I was at Early Mountain and making Lightwell and Midland. So Lightwell being sort of the project where we work with vineyards up and down the Shenandoah Valley, small growers, buying fruit, and Midland being where my brother and I grow fruit. And Early Mountain was basically incubating us and, really supportive. But Early Mountain was growing, and it became clear to me as the winemaker that at some point, like, there was not going to be space for both Early Mountain wine and Lightwell and Midland wine. And, it's pretty easy guess to understand which one needs to find a different place to be made. And they never said that, but as the person responsible for, managing the cellar, it was clear. So, and it was something my brother and I've been kicking around for a while. But we around 2019, we got serious about trying to make it happen. COVID happened, that slowed us down quite a bit, but honestly helped us because it made us look at, like, our plan a lot more, made us find the right location, that sort of stuff, that we might have rushed into some things that and not done it in the way we did. But a long story short, found some investors that were excited about the project and started making wine there in 2022. And the goal was to be a place, so there are custom crush facilities in Virginia, but especially in Central Virginia, there aren't any places where you can come in as an actual winemaker and make your wine there. It's more about you're a client and you kind of got to make wine according to the way that the winemaker at that winery is. And so, you know, if you look at California, Oregon, Washington State, there's a lot of these places that are places for young brands or places that just or wine labels that aren't big enough to build their own winery, and a winemaker can come in and make their wine there. And so that's what we wanted to do. And we set out to do that with kind of this lofty goal of being a place for the future of Virginia wine. So we wanted to help smaller brands get off their feet and just, you know, contribute to, you know, evolution and the next steps. And, you know, what does Virginia wine look like in 5 years, 10 years, and 20 years? And so that's been our kind of, you know, guiding statement in the way that we set things up and work with people. It's you know, we kind of looked at the wines that we were making with Lightwell and Midland and said, hey, if we were the client, what would we need, and set it up that way. So it is interesting ecosystem in that, you know, you have different winemakers walking around in the space talking to each other during harvest, which you don't usually see at a winery. Usually at best you're texting, maybe get on a phone call if you're, you know, sharing some challenges, but you don't get to go like day in and day out, like taste each other's fermentations, watch what each other are doing and be like, oh, I would have thought of that. And so it is sort of the challenges of trying to get a bunch of winemakers to work in the same space are you know, offset by like that sharing of knowledge both during the harvest and the growing season. So that's really rewarding. And then another thing we do is we have an incubator program that is meant to like support winemakers that come from, you know, less represented communities within the wine world. And so we did 2 projects last year, got 2 this year, and they tend to be, you know, start out micro, but we're really trying to help grow all sorts of different perspectives and in the industry. But with all of that, we also make some wines for Commonwealth. We've got a little wine bar type tasting room because we are in the city of Waynesboro. We're an urban winery, and so we make wines for ourselves, and that's been a lot of fun because we have a group of partners. They're all wine industry people, and so we've kind of let all of us get to, like, you know, have, you know, think of wines that we want to make, and so it's not just one winemaker thinking of it. And I think that's really what is distinctive about the Commonwealth Crush label in general, is like you've got a lot of different perspectives from each of the wines. Me being the person that's the most involved in the production, I got like 2 or 3 where everybody else got 1, but that's just because I'm there doing it. But this party Kiwi is one of them. You know, my relationship with Sauvignon Blanc is that I enjoy the grape, but I also, it's kind of like rosé. Like I love the great ones, and the bad ones I think just taste terrible, because like rosé, there is an industrialization of the grape because there is this flavor profile that's become standardized, and they're, you know, basically they've developed products that can like nail that flavor profile really well. So you get into this cycle of people trying to make wines taste more and more like Sauvignon Blanc. And so they're like 300% Sauvignon Blanc because of the way they've been made. And I just don't enjoy that. And so wanted to take a different tact on it. All of our wines we don't add yeast. We don't add anything except sulfur, and in relatively small amounts. So this is natural fermentation, which was relatively long. It occurred in both stainless steel and neutral barrel. And the one thing we did do is, so it went through partial mallow. So there's definitely texture from that there. But we wanted to preserve some of the acidity. So we stopped mallow like basically halfway through. And so it's relatively simple winemaking, with the idea that if the grapes are good, then you'll have an expressive wine. And I think what to me, what is interesting about this wine is like a lot of Sauvignon Blanc can be really sort of acid and linear, in a very sort of citrus and tart. Whereas this has good acidity, but it has this deeper textural thing that is, I think, a little bit unique.
Awesome. As you guys can see, Ben maybe come off very soft-spoken, but once you let him talk, he can talk for a while, which is what I love about him. I remember at one point at Early Mountain, I asked you a question. I thought it was gonna be like a simple question, and then you gave me like a 20-minute talk about like the particular like a pump down tech or something. I don't remember exactly, but I was like, oh wow, like. But anyways, I can't tell you how much I appreciate the deep dive that you go into it, like how much you nerd out on like a thing, which I really appreciate. But also you cover a lot of things I was going to ask you about, already. So, what's kind of like guiding principle when it comes down to winemaking? Is it kind of certain style approach you're taking with your winemaking there? I want to talk to you about Sauvignon Blanc and just kind of its difference from other Sauvignon Blanc style. What do you see in Virginia? You already covered that. So yeah, you're already covering a lot of things. So that's why I let you rip, let you cook. It's great. But speaking of grapes, I did want to ask you. I remember these were one of the questions I asked you when I was there, and then we talked at length about. My question was, obviously Virginia being this kind of like a obviously history of winemaking in Virginia dates all the way back, probably the founding of the country. But as a winemaking place, it's not very old, and there's a lot of experimentation, a lot of different things. People haven't quite figured out where and what grows the best and where yet, and a lot of that is still happening. And during that question, I asked you, what do you think is the most kind of a promising grape variety in Virginia? And you talked to me at length about Petit Manseng being kind of like this thing that is showing a lot of promise. Do you still feel that to be the same in Virginia now that, that was what, almost 5 years ago? Now that, I feel like a Virginia wine industry's growth rate is like a dog years. Like every year, it's like 7 years of growth. Like there's so much cool shit that's happening there, exciting stuff that's happening there. So yeah, 5 years later, do you still feel that fondly about Petit Manseng? There are some other things that are popping up on your radar, including hybrid grapes?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I still love Petit Manseng. Still make Petit Manseng in some shape or form. It's still a significant part of what I'm involved in. I mean, Lightwell, for instance, there's two rules. One is that all the wines are co-fermented, and the other is that every single wine, including the red wines, have some Petit Manseng in it. So it's something I'm still pretty excited about. And actually, sometimes when we were at Early Mountain, we would make Sauvignon Blanc, Petit Manseng blends. Those grapes go pretty well together. But to answer your question, like stuff I'm excited about these days. I mean, I think on the vinifera side of things, Albarino is an interesting one to watch.
Oh.
You'll probably see some tasty versions of those coming out of Virginia wineries. But it kind of does like this, provides the like floral fruity thing that people like, but not as intense as Viognier, and has really amazing acidity, kind of like Petit Manseng. But yeah, you mentioned hybrids, and so I think there's this whole exciting movement on the East Coast, and even like spreading across the country, even into the West Coast, of this idea that the kind of 5 most popular grape varieties in the world don't have to be the only ones we focus on, and maybe they shouldn't be, because the place they came from is probably pretty different from where we're growing. And as I feel like in the past 10 years, the wine drinking world has gotten a lot more, gotten blown wide open, and everyone's a lot more open about what a quality wine can be. So even European grapes that people haven't heard of, people are very open to those sorts of ideas. What's your topic next month?
Basque Country.
Yeah, so you're going to talk about some grapes that are hard to pronounce, and
yeah,
certainly not the top 5. But that sort of like change in the wine culture, global wine culture, has I think been really good for everywhere, but is especially important on the East Coast where the growing conditions are quite different. And so there's a lot of interest in newer varieties that come out of some of the breeding programs that could be in the US. There's a lot of grape breeding that's actually happening in Europe. And they're, for the most part, they're breeding for disease resistance there because as their weather changes, they're getting a lot more diseases that they didn't used to have. And so, especially the folks that are working in organics and biodynamics, it's becoming more and more challenging to grow some of their sort of heritage varieties. So they're taking those varieties and crossing them with a lot of times North American genetics that have disease resistance. And I think that's just a really exciting thing that's happening around the world. And this acceptance that, okay, we're going to let go of a name brand grape variety with the goal of like making something that is, easier to grow, more sustainable, better for the environment, and still delicious. And so I think in general, I'm excited about that movement. And so that's not a specific grape variety, but I think in 20 years, we're going to see this whole different landscape of new and lesser known grape varieties that are important. And maybe it means that we're not drinking as much varietally labeled wine. But I think overall, it's going to be like good for the land that we're growing on, good for the people that are working on that land, and good for the drinkers. So that is exciting. More specifically, I feel like Chardonnay, which is a hybrid grape variety out of Cornell, is really growing well in Virginia, and you can make some really kind of interesting wines that have depth and concentration. So the more people work with that, the more interesting wines you'll see, and it is much easier to grow than Chardonnay, which is one of its parents, in terms of disease resistance, cold hardiness, has better acidity, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, cool. What do you think is like the biggest challenge, not only for you, but for Virginia as a winemaking place?
Let's see. I mean, I think the entire United States has always been challenged by the fact that a lot of European regions not only have centuries head start on us, and sort of that built-in knowledge base and built-in vineyard infrastructure, but on top of that have agricultural subsidies in place for their wine growing because they're important culturally to their regions. And while there's plenty of agricultural subsidies here in the U.S., they don't really support the wine industry. So one of the biggest challenges is being competitive in the market. And you're putting your wines up against the wines of the world, and you can compete qualitatively, but sometimes somebody just wants the wine that costs $5 less because it costs $5 less, and cannot blame people for that. So I'd say that's certainly a challenge for Virginia, and also Virginia is just not a sort of mass production sort of state in terms of viticulture and winemaking, and so we're never going to have the sort of ability to make those $10 bottles of wine. And I think that's a challenge, but I also think that's okay. Like in terms of it's okay if we're a smaller industry that concentrates on higher quality wines. But once again, that's where these newer, easier to grow grape varieties can be helpful to us. They can bring down the cost of growing and let us provide all of you bottles of wine that are more affordable, but still taste good.
Yeah, I was actually having this conversation with one of my reps, and we were talking exactly what you're talking about. It's kind of like the real only strategy is like, one, really focus on quality. So instead of trying to beat them with the price, just beat them with the quality and let that shine through. And two is a lot more work with just hybrid grapes, just letting Virginia be the epicenter of hybrid grapes and the varieties that really show the rest what it can do, what it can be. What's the next 5 to 10 years look like for you, the custom Commonwealth crush pad and and Virginia?
Yeah, I mean, for Commonwealth Crush, I think we want to live up to our mission statement. So that's what we're working on, is being a place for younger projects to begin, grow, thrive. And so that's the focus. It's a pretty simple focus. My brother and I are continuing to be experimental in terms of what we plant. And so we are, so my brother Tim is, the way that we divide up the duties with Midland is he's a bit more in charge of the vineyard and I'm a bit more in charge of the winemaking, but we collaborate on both. And so he's been really interested in really pushing the envelope on lighter touch growing practices, more sustainable growing practices, and what does finding grape varieties that are easier to grow that still make good tasting wines. So I think that's our big goal for Midland, is to keep looking to plant grapes that are going to work for our children, that will be right for them. But kind of going back to the whole grape breeding thing, one of the things I helped start a few years ago was there's now a grape breeding program in Virginia, and that's supported by the Virginia industry, and it's actually a collaboration with USDA. They have a research station in Kearneysville, it's West Virginia, but still breeding for Virginia. And the goal is to breed high quality wine grapes that have the resistance to the challenges that we have here. So sort of very regional breeding. And so I think for Virginia, that's, you're not going to see the results of those for probably 10 years. But that's a very exciting thing, because not only are you breeding for, say, disease resistance or, the challenges, but you're also breeding quality wine, like stuff that ripens here, not necessarily New York, not necessarily North Carolina, not necessarily Burgundy or Bordeaux. It ripens well in Virginia. And so to have those be the kind of two guiding, that's what's guiding the breeding, is, quality wine in Virginia, and for Virginia's growing conditions. So I think that's exciting on the horizon. But yeah, I think those are the main things that are exciting to me.
Yeah. No, that all makes sense. Well, I want to be respectful of your time. I'm already 7 minutes past what you had were here to give us. But if you don't mind, I wanted to kind of open up the floor real quick, just to see if other folks have any questions for you. So yeah, if anyone has a question for Ben, here's your chance. Your chance to ask any questions about the wine, about Virginia, about Ben's personal life. I don't know.
Ben, how do you share your equipment with other, small makers, vintners?
Yeah, so that is a good question. It's the biggest challenge of running a multi-producer facility. The short answer is lots of organization, really making sure, very good record keeping, and sort of herding cats in terms of the winemakers, and really just like pushing them to like let us know as soon as possible like what they're going to need in a week, what they're going to need in 2 days, so that we can plan that there's time in the day and room in there's the press is available to them when they need the press. So it's not easy, it's the hardest part, but it's all about like organization. We have a really good winemaker and production manager. His name is Zach Clancy, who is really integral in making sure that the production schedule runs well. And so that's really I guess the short answer is having really good staff.
But if they all harvest at the same time, how do you fit them in?
Yeah, so I mean, that's where the communication happens, and a lot of what I do during harvest is reach out to all the winemakers and say, okay, Monday's filling up. I know that you've got your Cabernet Franc that you told me was almost ready. So are you going to bring it Tuesday? Do I need to mark that off? Are you going to bring it Wednesday? And there's also the people that have to pick the grapes. So luckily we can't just pick all the grapes on the same day. So there's other sort of logistics that are in the way of everything coming in at once. But in the end, it becomes first come, first serve, that if you're not on top of your winemaking game and you're not paying attention and you realize that it's going to rain tomorrow and you didn't tell me that you wanted to pick today, but everybody else told me 3 days ago, then we got to go with the person who's the most organized.
It's almost kind of like a air traffic controller for the grapes that are coming in. And this happened even at Early Mountain, even with their own wines, because sometimes two vineyards will be ripening at the same time, and they have to be picked at the same time, and you have to decide which one are you going to press or crush first. So we would rent these gigantic containers and refrigerate it and keep the grapes there while we're crushing one of them, because they both come in at the same time. And it's just like a constant logistical kind of coordination. It's pretty fascinating to watch. It's a lot that goes into it. But yeah.
And
great question.
and if there's a hurricane coming, for instance, basically what we're going to do is we're going to work as long a day as possible to get as much fruit in as possible for anybody that wants their fruit in. So we do our very best to get everyone in that needs to come in, and having these refrigerated containers is a very good way to like pick some fruit and process it the next day, sort of thing. So there are different tricks that are helpful as mentioned.
Any other questions? No?
Sorry, you may have answered this. So that tasting room in Waynesboro is like for the incubator, or basically like, I know it's like mostly what you're doing is functional, but if we wanted to come, like
so it's it ends up being more of a wine bar concept because we are pouring multiple brands.
Right. Sure.
And so the incubated projects, if there's wine available, will be there. Lightwell's there, Commonwealth's there, as well as some of the other places that make wine with us. But also because it's a city and it feels like a wine bar, we try to bring in, sometimes we'll bring in European wines that are kind of giving context to the other wines on the list, and just as a way to, and also just to make Waynesboro a more interesting place. It's not traditionally a wine town, so we're trying to change that a little bit for the city. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Thanks.
I'd say if you're looking for a cute, aesthetically, central place to taste a lot of different, like the exciting wines that are coming out of Virginia, that's probably a good tasting room to go to. Let's take one more question just so we can let Ben go, and then we'll go from there. Here's your chance.
Heidi has a question in the chat.
Is that research collecting information from grape growers on what is working right now? Are you asking if it's available, Heidi, somewhere?
That was in the context of that research to try to, yeah, sorry, go ahead, Heidi.
No, thank you so much. So that was in context of the research center that's in West Virginia that they're working on the hybrid grapes. I was wondering if they're collecting information on what's working right now. I've talked to a couple of vineyards up here. I live in Fauquier County, and they have a couple research vineyards actually where they have like 2 or 3 acres just for experimenting with other varieties. Hi, Beanie. And they said Fiano is doing really well, actually. So I just didn't know what they were collecting about right now.
Yeah, so so an important part of developing new varieties is testing other varieties, both to understand, why they work, but also they can be potentially parents in the breeding. But also, so Virginia Tech is a big part of, they have a experimental research vineyard very close to this breeding station. where they're bringing in some of the new varieties that have been bred in Germany, Italy, France, that sort of thing, and also putting in more sort of classic varieties so that you can have an understanding of like what what we know how it grows in Virginia versus these other things that are brand new. So that I think is Virginia's always been good at that in terms of like, as you mentioned, some of these other producers are just doing it on their own. But sort of asking the question of like, okay, feels like we have this sort of climate where around the world also has a climate like this or has similarities. And so let's look at some of those grape varieties and try them out. And that's why we have Petit Manseng now. It's why we have Viognier now. Tannat. There's a number of folks are starting to look towards Italian, especially Italian white varieties that retain acidity as these, it's so hot here these days. You think about the past 3 or 4 weeks, how hot it was in Virginia and I guess all over the East Coast. So acidity in grapes becomes really important. And when you think about the classical French grapes, it's further north there. So maybe they wanted grapes that didn't have as high acidity because it was so cold in Burgundy that those wines were so tart if they had a higher acid grape like they would grow in southern Italy. So it might make more sense to look at these warmer climates where the ripening conditions are more similar.
There's one quick clarifying question in the chat. Then this Party Kiwi is made at the facility, right?
Yeah, so it's that fits into like this the group of partners. We're all having these ideas about wines we can make, and as I mentioned, I got more than one, where everybody else got one. So this was one of mine, and the other I got 3 in 2022. The other 2 being I made a Chardonnay that was full mallow, unfiltered, no sulfur, and then very long aging Petit Manseng. As I mentioned, I'm still making Petit Manseng.
Love it, love it. As somebody who's been trying to make Jurançon Sec be the next thing in America, I appreciate your Petit Manseng production journey. Anyways, quick little feedback. I think winemakers always appreciate hearing directly from consumers. Do you guys like this wine? How do you guys feel about this wine? Any comments, any statements, even if you don't like it, just to give Ben some critical feedback?
This is delicious.
Cool. Any other feedback?
Question.
Yeah.
How long would you expect this to stay on the shelf for storage? How many years would we keep it?
That's a good question. I don't think I ever thought about it as like this wine to be aged for 10 years. But I don't think it's got lots of stuffing. So I would expect it would be interesting for 5 to 10. But it's, we bottled it relatively early. We didn't age it for a long time in barrel or anything like that. That kind of like with the truly long aged white wines, you might look to do, like Burgundy or the white Bordeaux that ages longer. So I think some of obviously you would lose some of the freshness as the wine ages over time, but I think that can be that the sort of interesting textural elements will help carry it longer than the average Sauvignon Blanc would. And I would expect the flavors to become more sort of, lighter on the fruit and more sort of maybe accentuating a little bit more of the earthiness. And a lot of times Sauvignon Blanc, as it gets older, it gets more honeyed to me in an interesting way. But the fruit almost turns to this sort of luscious sort of honey thing.
Sarah, you had a comment?
I was just gonna agree. Yeah, it's great. I love the name too, and like to me, yeah, I was gonna ask about the name, but you do kind of get a little bit of kiwi. I've only had kiwi flavored candy though, so I'm not a big kiwi eater. But you do get like so many fruits. It's great. So yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Oh, well, just to give you my feedback on this wine, again, my mind was blown as soon as I tasted Sauvignon Blanc. I don't think this, I think this was the very first Sauvignon Blanc I've ever tasted. Two, what I love about it is, and I know you've alluded to it many times, exactly that richness, the textural kind of component of the wine without losing that acid backbone of Sauvignon Blanc that you expect. So freshness with the richness, yeah. And again, nipple tassel on kiwi, like who doesn't like that label? I'm sorry, if you don't like that label, you probably came to the wrong wine club. That's basically what we want. Anyways, Ben, you've always been, first and foremost, congratulations on this new project, Commonwealth, super exciting. You've always been a wealth of information, really generous with your sharing of that knowledge, sharing of your time, and to watch you do that in a formal setting. I know you're already doing this, a lot of this at Early Mountain, but doing it as your own kind of a thing, kind of being the Yoda, like I said, of Virginia, for the Virginia winemakers is really exciting. And I can't wait to see what else you do with that space and what kind of wines turn out from there. So thank you. I know we ran a little bit late today, but again, I really appreciate you always being so generous with your time and knowledge with me and everyone else in the community, in the wine community. So thank you. And everybody else, Ben Jordan of Commonwealth Press Company. Any final departing words, Ben, or is there a good way, a good place for people to follow what you're up to or what Commonwealth is up to, whether it be social media or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, we're Commonwealth Crush on Instagram, and I'm Ben at CommonwealthCrush.com. If anyone needs to contact me or wants to come visit, let me know. But yeah, thank you for having me. Thank you for supporting us. It really means a lot. And thanks for making it happen from Seoul. That's pretty cool.
Yep, happy to. I'm happy to bring probably like Joe was saying, probably the first Virginia wine that has ever touched Korean Peninsula. So happy to be that person. Cool. Well, Ben, I'll let you go. I know we're already way past. So again, thank you. Have a nice night, cool. Ben.
Yep. Y'all have a great night.
All right. There you go, folks. This is Ben. I know for a lot of you, that was the third time you've seen Ben, but I don't know. I love that guy. He's great. He's so, like, he plays it off so just chill and laid back, but the amount of knowledge that guy has in his head, particularly about Virginia, is insane. He can tell you about this particular vineyard site in some place, like he's constantly seeking new places, new sites, constantly looking at geological maps, constantly trying to find the next new vineyard. Like it is insane, the kind of, and on top of all the work that he already does at his winery. So yeah, he's a constant explorer, seeking of the new place and new things and exciting things. And yeah, I appreciate that guy. And he's always so generous with his knowledge and time, like I said. So
he's the same way on Instagram. Like if you DM him with a question, he'll just keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. It's also, and like I said, be careful with the questions you ask. You may get a 2 full page, like type 10 fucking dissertation on a simple question that you ask him. Just the kind of person it is, and I love him for it. It's great.
I do have a question, but I didn't want to embarrass you. What is co-fermentation?
4 years, Sarah. 4 years.
They just give it
Have
all
you learned
open
nothing
in this shared space? I know. I told you I didn't want to embarrass you.
No. So, co-ferment. So, usually when the wine is made, they are vinified separately, and then they get blended later. So they do blending trials, or where they mix like 9 parts this, 1 part this, 2 parts this, 8 parts that, whatever. And they blend it later, and then they just mix the wines later to blend it all out. Co-ferment is basically taking all the grapes and putting them together and fermenting it all together, as opposed to vinifying it separately and blending.
But he was saying that at the whole, like all these different winemakers. Is that what he was saying? Or did I misunderstand?
No. He's saying at Nightwell Survey, which is one of the brands that he
Not
makes
the,
wines for.
not the, okay. I thought he was saying that for his incubator.
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
I mean, he may
Okay.
have said it's like maybe like use that as a metaphor. It's like a co-fermentation of a winemaker's like coming in, perhaps. But yeah, Nightwell Survey as a thematic kind of a winemaking, their whole thing is co-ferment. So they take all these different hybrid grapes, vinifera grapes, and whatnot, and then just co-ferment as opposed to blending separately and blending it, vinifying separately and blending. So,
Okay. Thank you.
yep.
So, what would you say is the does the fact that multiple grapes are co-fermenting, does one grape affect the fermentation of the other grapes?
Yeah,
Or-
so that's a great question. So why would you want to do that? So one is usually a tradition. So traditionally, when we look at human history, the wines were co-fermented. In fact, this idea of single varietal winemaking is very new and recent. Back in the days, all the wines are pretty much field blends. People didn't really care about like exactly what grape was growing. It's just they harvested whatever grapes were grown in that field and they fermented all together. So there were co-ferments. So there's some of that going back to the basics, going back to the old tradition. There are certain kind of like the different styles, right? Like the cooking style, right? If you put something in a pot and kind of like cook it together for a long time, like gumbo versus like a good salad, right? Even though it's all mixed together, it is a lot more. Something happens, the flavors kind of meld together and it creates something new, kind of a melded flavor together. There's some of that happening for fermentation as opposed to just blending it later. So it's not necessarily that one is better than the other. It's just more of a stylistically what they're chasing after.
You make it sound like a
It could,
soup versus a salad, right? In terms of the flavors being blended.
say that again?
A soup versus a salad, right? Are they blended?
Kind of
or
like that.
is-
Yeah. So yeah, something that's low and slow versus something that's fast and quick and like sauteed together or something like that. That's a good like that.
But now, since like certain grape varietals will ripen at different times, so would you crush a different varietal later and then just add it to the vat, or would you?
You can do that too. Yeah, okay. Some people do that too, or some people actually want it that way. They want some of that kind of like phenolic, green, kind of piercing, heavy, almost unripe acidity with a savory component to it. So they will add like a touch of that into a very ripe grapes, and then they're co-fermented together. So it really kind of depends on what you are making, what kind of style you're going for. But yeah, there's that. To me, co-fermentation is a much riskier way of making wine. I mean, that's the whole reason why this blending happened later, because you can really control each component of the wine, get it to the optimal ripeness as alluded to, and then blend it later. That's much safer than, like you're saying, all these different varieties and vineyards ripening at different rates and somehow putting them all together and blending it, fermenting it all together. There's way less control and way less predictability. So, any other questions? I know I know you guys are not.
Sorry. One more co-fermentation.
Yeah.
So you did that, right? So if it's so much more experimental, do you make one big bat at a time, or are you doing a couple of different small ones at different like ratios to game it out? I guess it depends. Depends on the maker.
Yeah, it depends on the winemaker. Even more so than winemaker, I would say it depends on the facility's capacity. If you have a gigantic tank that can accommodate all the grape, they probably will co-ferment all of it. But oftentimes they don't have that, so they just end up making it in difference, and then they end up blending it all together. I know you guys are not the ones to shy away from expressing your true preference, but now that winemaker is gone, tell me how you really feel about this wine. Do you guys really like this? Is this weird? Is it too rich? Is it too fruity? How do you guys feel about it?
It tastes like trolley peach rings.
It's delicious, right?
I really liked it too. It just went down so easy.
Very tasty.
Sorry, was there something else? Was Ryan saying something?
No, I liked it. It was very good. I enjoyed it.
Yeah. No, it's
the
super
porch
fun.
pounder.
Yeah, delicious. But like it's not just juice, right? Like it's fruity, it's approachable, but like there's a textural thing. It's rich. There's some depth to it, which is awesome. But cool. Let's play everyone's favorite game. How much do you think this is on a retail shelf? How much would you be happy paying for this on a retail shelf? It is Virginia. And as Ben alluded to, there's not kind of a economy of scale there yet. But nonetheless, it's a young variety or a young grapevine, not super old, not super well established vineyards always. All right, 30-20, 25-20, 25-28, 28-28. Man, I say this every time, but you guys are getting pretty good at this. You guys all come within $5 range, but on the retail shelf, this wine will be $25.
It helps.
I think
it really helps that pretty much all the wines you give us are about the same price. So
fair enough. Fair enough. Even with the ones that are more expensive, you guys get pretty close. And then sometimes I guess things that are pretty low, but you guys get pretty close though. But yeah, you're right. Probably like 90% of the wines are probably all within that range. Yeah, this would be 25. So I think it's a pretty good deal for $25 for 12.1%. You know, ABV, pretty lean for a warm place like Virginia. It's dope. It's great.
I think this wine has some salinity in the flavor. I'm surprised that something that far away from the coast gets that.
It's probably that limestone. It's grown on limestone. The soil there. That's another thing that's really interesting about Virginia. As Ben mentioned, there's most of it is just kind of granite that's thrown everywhere, but there are these pockets of really deep limestone bedrocks that run in certain parts of Virginia. I don't know if you guys remember what is that cidery in Bath County, Charltonville, the Virginia cider that we featured. They have a plot on their land. They have a plot, this section that has so much limestone in it that Ben is actually trying to get them to plant Riesling there. So we shall see if that's a good thing or not. I mean, Ben already makes Riesling from Virginia. His family plot that he owns with he farms with his brother is planted to Riesling. So like he's that crazy guy who plants Riesling in Virginia. So he's always out there looking for different ways to express Virginia landscape. Do you guys have any other questions about the wine or anything else? Cool.
Who was the distributor?
Williams Corner. Commonwealth is, anytime you see Commonwealth, it's pretty much all Williams Corner. They distribute all of it.
We want to say hi.
Hey, kiddo.
Say hi. Say good night. Good night.
Yeah, so all of you Virginia wine haters, drink this. Like, tell me that that's not good. Like, it's so good. It's delicious. How's everything? How are things in shit. Did I not record the session? Of course I didn't. Oh no, I did. It's in a different place.